The camera opens on a flickering candlelight in a small, dusty room of 18th century Frankfurt. A frail man bends over a table cluttered with coins, ledgers, and torn parchment. Outside, rain lashes against the cracked window. His wife warms soup over a dying fire while 5 little children huddle together on the floor. A faint whisper fills the silence. One day, the world will know our name. That man was Meyer Amschel Rothschild, a poor Jewish money changer who lived in a ghetto so small it could barely hold his dreams. Cut to a golden carriage rolling through London. Paris and Vienna. Coins rain. Kings bow. Empires tremble. The same name now echoes across Europe, Rothschild. But behind the wealth, power, and history's greatest fortune lies a story not just of money, but of faith, betrayal, unity, and the unbreakable strength of family. The streets of Frankfurt in the late 1700s were narrow veins of mud and noise, where the scent of coal smoke mixed with the cries of merchants and the rattle of carriage wheels. Deep inside the city's Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto, stood a crooked little house with a single flickering candle burning through the night. Inside, a young man bent over a wooden table, his hands stained with the dust of coins. His name was Meyer Amschel Rothschild, and though he lived in poverty, he carried in his chest a heart that refused to surrender. The rain outside hammered against the window, leaking through tiny cracks in the glass. Meyer's wife, Gutli, stirred a pot of thin soup over a weak fire, while their 5 small children huddled together beneath a tattered blanket. Every coin Meyer earned went toward food, rent, or candles, those small, glowing pillars that allowed him to read late into the night. He devoured every scrap of knowledge he could find about trade, economics, and history. Books were his escape, his rebellion against a world that told him he was worth nothing more than the coins he cleaned. Meyer's father had once been a coin dealer too, but life had beaten him down. He died poor, leaving his son a tiny shop and one priceless piece of advice. Never sell your name, my son. Gold can be stolen, titles can be lost, but a good name endures beyond death. Those words lived inside Meyer like scripture. Each time he held a coin, he imagined not its price, but the story behind it. Who minted it? Who touched it? What power did it once represent? That curiosity, that obsession with the flow of wealth and trust, would soon lead him far beyond the ghetto walls. One stormy evening, as thunder rolled through the narrow streets, a soldier stumbled into his shop. The man was cold, desperate, and broke. He offered Meyer a single gold coin in exchange for food and shelter. Meyer studied it carefully and realized it wasn't just any coin. It bore the insignia of the Prince of Hesse, one of the most powerful men in Germany. Meyer fed the soldier and kept the coin safely, his mind racing. The next morning, despite his wife's worried protest, he walked miles through the rain to the prince's palace. The guards laughed at the sight of the poor Jewish man, standing in his soaked coat, clutching a tiny pouch. But Meyer insisted on seeing the prince. After hours of waiting, he was granted an audience. Bowing deeply, he placed the gold coin before the prince and explained how it came into his hands. The prince, surprised by his honesty and knowledge, asked him questions about the coin's origin and value. Meyer answered each one with precision, his voice steady, though his hands trembled. By the end of the meeting, the prince smiled. "You have an eye for truth," he said. "From now on, you will handle my collection." That day changed everything. The poor coin cleaner from the ghetto was now the royal coin appraiser, a position that allowed him to meet nobles, merchants, and men of power. But Meyer never forgot his roots. He still returned each night to his small home, greeting Gutli and the children with the same warmth, even as whispers about his rising fortune spread. His success was not luck. It was patience, trust, and an iron will to build something no one could take away. As the years passed, Meyer began to lend money, first to small traders, then to merchants, and finally to noblemen. But he was careful. Where others saw profit, he saw relationships. He understood that trust was worth more than gold. Each loan he gave came with a handshake, not a threat. And when others mocked him for helping people of all faiths, he simply said, "A man's word is his true currency." His reputation spread quietly across Europe. People came not because he was the richest banker, but because he was the most reliable. Still, Mayer knew that being a Jewish man in a Christian empire meant he could never let his guard down. There were riots, restrictions, and whispers of hate. His children often saw signs painted on walls, mocking their faith, cursing their name. But Mayer turned pain into purpose. Each night at the dinner table, he would tell his sons stories not of kings or warriors, but of discipline and unity. "One man can be broken," he told them, "but a family bound together can survive anything." He taught them about trade, communication, and strategy. When other fathers bought toys, Mayer gave his sons ledgers and maps. When they asked why they couldn't live like other families, he smiled softly. "Because one day," he said, "you will not just live in this world, you will shape it." The years hardened them. The ghetto's narrow walls could no longer contain their ambition. Mayer began to see the future not as a dream, but as a plan. He realized that Europe was changing. Empires were expanding, wars were brewing, and nations were hungry for money to feed their armies. He saw that if his sons could be placed in key cities, they could create something no kingdom had ever achieved. A family network that moved information and finance faster than any government. So he made a decision that would alter history. He called his sons to his side one cold winter night. The fire crackled as snow fell silently outside. He looked at each of them, Amschel, Salomon, Nathan, Carl, and James, and spoke with the weight of destiny. "Each of you will go into a different land," he said. "You will carry our name and our code. You will trade not in lies but in honor. And no matter how far apart you are, you will write to one another as brothers. You will share everything, profits, losses, and secrets. If one of you falls, the others must lift him. Promise me this." They swore it. That night, the Rothschild dynasty was born, not from gold, but from a vow. In the following years, the brothers departed one by one. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt to watch over the family home. Salomon went to Vienna, Carl to Naples, James to Paris, and Nathan to London. Each carried with him not just money, but the lessons of their father, the value of unity, the power of trust, and the wisdom of patience. Before long, coded letters began to fly between the cities. Using a private courier system, the brothers exchanged financial news, political updates, and market predictions faster than any government messenger could. They built a living network of information that gave them an invisible advantage in every major financial event of the century. And through it all, Mayer watched with quiet pride. His sons were no longer the barefoot boys from the ghetto. They were men building a legacy. Yet he reminded them always to stay humble, to never forget where they came from. When one of his sons asked him, "Father, are we rich now?" Mayer simply replied, "We are rich in unity. That is all that matters." As his health began to fade, he spent his final days surrounded by his family. On his deathbed, he looked at Gutler, then at his sons, and said softly, "Remember the promise. Wealth will test you, power will tempt you, but your name, our name, must always stand for trust. If you keep that, we will never truly die." When Mayer Amschel Rothschild passed away in 1812, he left behind no title, no mansion of gold, but a foundation so strong that his descendants would go on to control the finances of empires. From the mud of the Frankfurt ghetto, he had built a dynasty, and somewhere beyond the veil of time, the whisper of that candlelit night still lingers. One day the world will know our name. Europe trembled in the early years of the 19th century. The continent was a chessboard of empires locked in war, and the air smelled of smoke and uncertainty. But amidst that chaos, a quiet power was rising, not a throne, not an army, but a family whose influence stretched further than the reach of any king. The Rothschild brothers had taken their father's promise and turned it into purpose. From London to Vienna, from Paris to Naples, they built bridges of gold and letters, carrying the weight of a legacy that began in the narrow alleys of Frankfurt. Nathan Meyer Rothschild, the third son, stood at the heart of it all. He had settled in London, a city bursting with opportunity and greed, where the streets were paved not with gold, but with ambition. Nathan was bold, restless and fearless, the kind of man who didn't wait for fortune to arrive. He chased it through storms. His father's lessons echoed in his mind each morning as he walked through the fog-laced streets toward the financial district. Trust is wealth. Keep your word, and kings will come to you. The Napoleonic Wars had thrown Europe into ruin. Nations borrowed endlessly to fund their armies, their treasuries drained by gunpowder and blood. Governments turned to banks for survival, and the Rothschilds were ready. Nathan became Britain's financial lifeline. While others hesitated to lend to a nation at war, he took the risk because he didn't see chaos. He saw opportunity. Through a network of couriers and coded messages, he coordinated with his brothers on the continent, moving gold across borders as quietly as shadows. When Britain prepared for the decisive battle against Napoleon at Waterloo, Nathan took his boldest gamble yet. He used the Rothschild network to transport vast sums of money, secretly funding the troops that would face the French emperor. The sea was rough, enemy ships patrolled the waters, but the gold reached its destination. Britain fought, and the fate of Europe hung in the balance. Then came the morning after the battle. Napoleon had fallen, but the world didn't know it yet. In a time when information traveled slower than a horse's gallop, knowledge was power, and the Rothschilds had it first. One of Nathan's couriers, riding through rain and mud, delivered the news of Napoleon's defeat to London before any official messenger. Standing in the London Stock Exchange, Nathan kept his face unreadable. He began selling British government bonds. The traders around him panicked, believing that Britain had lost the war. Prices plummeted. In the chaos, Nathan quietly bought back the bonds at fractions of their value. By the time the government confirmed the victory at Waterloo, it was too late. The Rothschilds owned the market. Nathan had not only outsmarted London's wealthiest men, he had reshaped the world's understanding of power. His fortune now rivaled that of nations, but he wore it lightly. He still lived with discipline, ate simply, and never forgot the candlelit room in Frankfurt where it all began. Yet the brothers knew that wealth invited envy as surely as light drew moths. Whispers began to circulate across Europe, rumors that the Rothschilds were puppet masters, that they controlled kings and wars. Some called them geniuses, others devils, but the brothers ignored the noise. Their father's vow of unity was their shield. They trusted one another completely, communicating through secret codes that even governments could not decipher. Their letters, written in ink that sometimes faded before enemies could intercept, carried not only business, but brotherhood. In Paris, James Rothschild built an empire of culture and innovation. His elegant salons were filled with artists, scientists, and thinkers. He financed railroads and bridges, but also hospitals and orphanages. He believed that wealth without compassion was poverty in disguise. When asked why he gave so much, he smiled and said, "A name means nothing if it's not spoken with respect." In Vienna, Salomon Rothschild became a pillar of stability in a world of constant upheaval. He lent not only money but advice to emperors, guiding them through wars and treaties. He understood that politics changed with seasons, but trust was eternal. His letters to Nathan often ended with the same line, "We are 5 arrows, separate, yet one quiver." Karl Rothschild in Naples faced his own battles. Italy was fractured and turbulent, but Karl's patience and skill made him indispensable to kings who needed gold to keep their thrones. He used diplomacy where others used force, earning the respect of men who once refused to even shake his hand. And back in Frankfurt, the eldest brother, Amschel, watched over the family's roots. He guarded their name, kept the books, and ensured that their mother Gutler never wanted for comfort. Though he never left home, his role was as vital as any of his brothers. He was the heart that kept the blood of the family flowing. Together, they created something extraordinary. Their network stretched across nations and wars, connecting the capitals of Europe in ways no empire ever had. Their couriers carried letters faster than royal messengers, and their word was as trusted as any crown seal. Governments borrowed from them. Armies depended on them. They had built a bridge of trust so strong that even the fires of revolution could not burn it down. But their success was not without cost. The Rothschild name became both legend and target. People feared what they could not understand. Conspiracy spread like shadow. Claims that they controlled the world's wealth, that they ruled behind the curtains of history. Yet the truth was simpler and more human. They were brothers bound by love, loyalty, and a promise to never betray each other. In private moments, Nathan often wrote to his brothers about his loneliness. "The more we build, the more distance grows between us," he confessed once. "The world calls us powerful, but what I miss most is home. The sound of father's voice, the warmth of mother's table." The letters that returned were full of affection and reassurance. They reminded each other that their empire meant nothing without their bond. Years turned into decades. The brothers aged, their children grew, and the torch passed quietly to the next generation. The world around them changed. New nations were born, old ones crumbled, but the Rothschild network endured. Banks rose and fell, markets crashed and recovered, but the family's name remained a constant whisper in the halls of power. Through wars and revolutions, through peace treaties and new inventions, the Rothschilds never forgot what their father had taught them in the ghetto. Unity was strength. Their fortune may have been measured in gold, but their true wealth was invisible. Their loyalty, their reputation, and their name. As the 19th century drew to a close, the world began to see what Meyer Amschel had foreseen in that candle-lit room so many years before. His 5 sons had not just built banks. They had built bridges between nations, proving that knowledge and trust could move mountains more surely than armies. When Nathan died, thousands attended his funeral. The richest man in Europe was laid to rest, not as a king, but as a man whose word had become law in the world of money. His brothers wept not for his fortune, but for the brother who had carried their father's dream the farthest. And as they stood together, united in grief and pride, they knew that the world would remember them not just as the richest family in history, but as a symbol of what faith, unity, and relentless will could achieve. Long after their time, when nations forgot the kings they served and the wars they funded, one truth still endured: power fades, empires crumble. But a family that stays united can outlast history itself.